a cable into the spring-loaded end of the cable holder, pulling the fiber tip up to the edge of the cable holder. Carefully insert the fiber into the connector until it bottoms. It is important that the fiber comes up against the fiber stub in the connector. Notice that the second mark on the fiber enters the connector. If it doesn't, then the fiber is not inserted far enough. The fiber should be bowed so that the bow touches the cable holder in the center. You are now ready to crimp the connector. Close the crimp tool 3 clicks. Insert the connector into the nose of the die set in the direction of the arrow. Snug up the crimp tool on the connector so that you can release your hand from the cable and cable holder. Then, with both hands, slowly squeeze the tool closed until the ratchet releases. Be careful not to pull on the cable or otherwise disturb the splice you just made. Any disturbance will increase insertion loss and degrade performance. Again, close the crimp tool 3 clicks. Now insert the connector into the hex cavity of the tool. The shoulder of the plunger should be against the cavity. Once again, pay special attention to the direction of the arrow. Squeeze the handles until the die's bottom and the ratchet releases. Remove the connector from the crimp tool. Reinstall the ferrule dust cover. Release the cable from the spring-loaded clamp and slide the boot into place on the back of the connector. Hold the connector tightly while the boot is pushed on the connector so you don't dislodge the fiber from the stub. The boot should be flush with the coupling nut. Carefully remove the connector from the holder. Use caution so as not to pull on the fiber itself. The termination is complete. If you have just terminated a Light Crimp Plus connector for the first time, you should test your first dozen or so with a power meter or OTDR to make sure the connector loss is within the acceptable limit. Next, we'll repeat the procedure with an SC connector. Remove the front and rear dust covers. Save the front dust cover to protect the ferrule after the termination is completed. Place the connector into the holder with the ferrule facing outward. Slide the bare buffer boot over the fiber and out of the way. The thin end goes on first. Using the buffer area of the cable holder, place the fiber in the groove up to the stop. Mark the fiber at the 2 slots on the holder. Strip the coating or buffer up to the first mark. Strip the buffer in 3 or 4 passes, rather than one big strip that could break the fiber. Clean the fiber with an alcohol wipe. Open the cleave tool by pressing on the rear arm. Slide the fiber into the tool until the buffer or coating end is at the 8 mm mark. Now release the rear arm to lock the fiber in place. Hold the buffer area down firmly in the beaver tail groove to ensure the fiber is perpendicular to the cleave blade. Momentarily press down on the cleaving arm to scribe the fiber. Only light pressure is needed. Be sure the cleaving arm is raised before proceeding. Hold the fiber and bend the tongue to cleave the fiber. It is important to remember not to bend the tongue more than 45 degrees, or damage to the tool will result. The fiber is held in the holder until it is discarded. Remember not to touch or contaminate the fiber before you insert it into the connector. Only if you are using 250 micron coated fiber, insert the white Hytrel tubing into the back of the connector body. Push it in until it bottoms. The white Hytrel tubing is used only when terminating 250 micron coated fibers. Insert the cable into the spring-loaded end of the cable holder, pulling the fiber tip up to the edge of the cable holder. Insert the fiber into the connector until it bottoms on the fiber stub in the connector. The mark on the fiber will enter the connector body as an indication that the fiber is inserted far enough. The cable should be bowed so that the bow touches the cable holder in the center. You are now ready to crimp the connector. Close the crimp tool 2 clicks. Insert the connector into the nose of the die set in the direction of the arrow. Snug up the crimp tool on the connector and remove your hand from the cable and cable holder. Now, using both hands, slowly squeeze the tool closed until the ratchet releases. Remove the connector from the crimping tool, being very careful not to disturb the crimp or pull on the fiber. Again, close the tool down 2 clicks. Now, insert the connector into the hex cavity of the tool. The shoulder of the plunger should be against the cavity. Squeeze the handles until the die's bottom and the ratchet releases. Then remove the connector from the crimping tool. Reinstall the ferrule dust cover. Release the cable from the spring-loaded clamp and slide the boot onto the rear of the connector. Now remove the connector from the cable holder. The angled side of the connector should line up with the angled slots on the housing. Install the connector into the outer housing and push it in until it snaps into place. You're done. Next, we'll show you how to terminate an ST-style connector and fiber with a 2.5 or 3 millimeter jacket. The procedure is very similar to terminating a buffered fiber, except that it involves an additional crimp to fasten the cable's strength members to the connector. Remove the front and rear dust covers. Save the front dust cover to protect the ferrule after the termination. Place the connector in the fiber holder with the ferrule facing outward. Begin by sliding the strain relief boot onto the cable and out of your way. Lay the cable in the groove marked Cable. The cable end should be against the stop. Use a marker to mark the cable at the 2 slots provided. Marking the cable properly is one key to a successful termination. Make sure the marks are clear and correct. Use the cable stripper to cut the jacket at both marks. Then remove the end segment. Leave the second jacket segment on the cable for now. Cut the strength members even with the jacket. Now, remove the second jacket segment. Fold the strength members back over the cable. Then slide the crimp eyelet, small end first, over the cable to hold the strength members in place out of the way. Position the eyelet flush with the end of the jacket. Slide the inner eyelet, small end first, onto the buffered fiber, pushing it back under the strength members. Place the fiber into the groove marked buffer until it bottoms on the stop. The eyelet should fit easily into the recess. If it doesn't, you may have stripped the jacket incorrectly. Mark the fiber at the 2 slots on the holder. Remember that careful and correct marking is important. Strip the buffer in 3 or 4 passes, rather than one big strip that could break the fiber. Clean the fiber with an alcohol wipe. Open the cleave tool by pressing on the rear arm. Slide the fiber into the tool until the buffer end is at the 1/8